Hello, everyone, and thank you all for listening in and participating in this teaching. Now, before we begin, we always like to explain that these teachings are based on logic and reason and a heavy use of the notion or the law of cause and effect. So, the reason why we mention that it's important to use your logic and reason to criticize what is being said and also to be critical about your own belief systems and be able to put them into question. And before we begin, we always start with a beginning meditation just to calm the mind, release any tensions or stresses, and to make sure that your mind is clear and free from any other thoughts so that you're not thinking of what you're going to do later or what you've done before or any other of those thoughts or mental activity. So your mind is completely receptive and open to the teaching in order for you to contemplate completely. So please take a comfortable meditation posture in which you can be both relaxed and alert. Make sure that your back is straight, but not tense. Rest your hands in your lap and gently close your eyes. Now just take a few moments to let all the tensions in your mind and in your body fall away. And now bring your attention gently and peacefully at the tip of your nostrils, at the sensation of the breath as you inhale and exhale. And let all other thoughts and feelings dissolve. Bring your mind completely on the sensation of the breath at the tip of your nostrils, and let that sensation pervade your mind. If your mind has wandered, then gently and peacefully bring your mind back to the sensation of the breath at the tip of your nostrils, and let every other thought or feeling dissolve. Just let it all go. And just let there be only the sensation of the breath. Now bring your attention inwards and just watch the flow of thoughts and feelings that arise within the space of your mind. Do not hold on to anyone in particular. Just watch as they appear and dissolve within the space of your mind. Now imagine that your mind is like the sky and that your thoughts and feelings are like clouds. Just as clouds form and disperse within the sky, your thoughts and feelings appear and dissolve within the space of your mind. And just as when all the clouds disperse to reveal the clarity of the sky, which is formless and limitless, just space. In the same way, no matter how busy the mind might be, when you let all your thoughts and feelings dissolve, the clarity of your mind is revealed, which is formless and limitless, just like a clear blue sky. So just keep watching your thoughts and feelings as if they were clouds, and watch as they form and disperse and dissolve within the space of your mind. Now imagine that all your thoughts and feelings dissolve, and what is left is the clarity of your mind, which is just like a clear blue sky. So let all the clouds of your mind disperse. And once you can imagine your mind like a clear blue sky, formless, unobstructed, and limitless. That is the object of meditation. And enjoy the peace of mind it evokes. And if any other thoughts appear, just let them dissolve, just like a cloud would disperse in the sky. And come back to the clarity of your mind, which is just like a clear blue sky. And now, before rising from meditation, make a determination to maintain this peace of mind and this clarity of mind so that it influences everything you think, say, and do. And now you can gently rise from meditation. So, this teaching is about compassion, why we should develop compassion, and why we ought to practice compassion. And this from a logical standpoint. So, the first thing to understand is what is compassion? So, compassion is a mind that is motivated by love, which is the wish to have others be happy. So, the wish for others to be happy. And from that love, which was explained in the last teaching, in the other teaching on love, there's a motivation to wish others to be free from suffering because you wish for their happiness. So, as you can see from that definition, the definition that we're using for compassion in this teaching is a selfless mind. Whereas the mind of selfishness is the mind that thinks, I need to be free from suffering. Because compassion is directed only to others from that definition, we'll come to explain how terminology that is being used nowadays might come in contradiction to what is being said, such as the terminology of self-compassion. And we're also going to discuss how, or the underlying premise of compassion fatigue and how that's being used, and to see if that holds up in the current discussion and how we present compassion. So, compassion is quite simple from that definition. So, from love, we develop compassion. And if we are to look at when we develop compassion, true compassion, because basically, we already have certain degrees of compassion, but it's very biased. We have maybe more compassion for family and friends, those that are close to us. Yet, if we look at those that are maybe experiencing good conditions, or strangers, or those that are harming others, we might not feel any compassion for them. And on the flip side, we might actually feel jealousy or hate towards them. So, actually, at the complete opposite spectrum of compassion. And nowadays, it's difficult to understand, especially that we're promoting. It's what's being promoted nowadays is a lot of individuality, always about self-thinking and self-importance, and we'll explain how that comes in contradiction is actually at odds with compassion, and especially with the word like we were mentioning, self-compassion, which is a bit weird from the definition of a wish for others to be free from suffering. So, if we really want to be happy, and this all stems from our want and our desire to be happy all the time, and how compassion is a key to creating that happiness we so long for. And therefore, we need to practice and generate the mind of compassion, and practice to be able to generate at all times towards all living beings, no matter what the situation may be. And this is the hard part, because our mind is very biased, and depending on the situation, it fluctuates, and our compassion leaves us depending on the situation. So, what we're trying to do in this teaching is show why we should logically develop the mind of compassion for all living beings, and why it actually is the mindset to help our community and our world nowadays that seems to be self-destructing. Yeah. So why the mind of compassion? So why is it so important? But why does it stand from a logical standpoint? Why it makes sense to be compassionate as opposed to It might seem flighty or up in the air as we don't really have the logical reasonings to explain why we should develop compassion, as opposed to the mind of self cherishing or the mind of individuality saying, I'm the most important. So let's stem from the opposite. So, what's the opposite mind of I wish others to be free from suffering? Or if we go back to love, so I wish others to be happy. And basically, the mind of self cherishing is the opposite mind, meaning I want to be happy. It's all about me. And so it's a very selfish, egotistical mind, which is the opposite of compassion. Okay? So, therefore, let's look at the selfish mind, the egotistical mind. Therefore, from a starting point, if everyone thinks they're important, not really, no one's important from that, a very basic logical standpoint. Therefore, if we are to ask the question, what is the logical reasoning to argue against I'm the most important person? That thought that says I'm important and I'm the most important. And if we look around, if we ask everybody, everyone's thinking the same thing. I'm the most important and I'm the most important. And if you ask anybody. So therefore, what is the logical reasoning to argue that one person is more important than the other with regards to their happiness, since everyone else is also thinking that they're the most important? So that simple phrasing or that simple thought experiment just comes to show that there's actually no logical reasoning to show that self-cherishing, or the mind that thinks that we're the most important, the egotistical mind, is actually true. Basically, there's no argument and it's completely arbitrary. And if we look at it from a functional perspective, is it functional or dysfunctional? And we look at it from a cause and effect perspective. So let's look at it on a micro scale, on a small scale, in order to show or in order to see how if it is actually a functional mind, meaning a mind that actually works to make things harmonious and to make us feel better. So let's take a small unit of maybe a couple of friends or maybe a little family unit, and imagine that all members of that group are very selfish. Yeah? They're only thinking about themselves and believe that they are the most important, regardless of the other people around them, regardless of the other members of that group. So if we look at that situation, we could easily we'll easily see that it becomes dysfunctional as a group. Yeah, they'll be at odds with each other, especially if they don't share the same wants and desires, and they'll probably fight, get angry, and it will become quite dysfunctional as a group, which will probably be disbanded or they'll never talk to each other again. And we probably have examples in our life where this is the actual case, where you see friends being disbanded or family members that do no longer speak to each other because of whatever someone said and they didn't like, and they're the most important. They want to do whatever they want and they don't want to share or whatnot. So we could see very quickly how the mind of self-cherishing or the mind of self-importance or the egotistical mind is a dysfunctional mind. So we just have to take it at a small scale to come to see how dysfunctional it can be. Now, if we look at it from that scale, it's easy to see. And if we look at a cause and effect perspective, we could see that a mind of self-importance or the egotistical mind is always dysfunctional. It always creates a dysfunction, something at odds with other people, and create anger and suffering like everything else. And why it's important to rely on the logic and the law of cause and effect is because the law of cause and effect, one of the premises of cause and effect, is that when you repeat a cause, it creates the same effect every single time. To give you an example of that, if we put water in the freezer, we always get ice. And that is systematic. It won't magically change to boiling water or the opposite effect. Why this is important is because the effect is definite from its cause. And therefore, every time you repeat the cause, then you get the same effect. So if we take that same logical reasoning and apply it to selfishness or the self-important mind, the mind that believes they're self-important, they're the most important thing, and it's dysfunctional on a small scale. So therefore the cause, so the effect of a dysfunctional group or anger and suffering from it, or the effect of it, is coming from the cause of a mind of self-importance. And every time we repeat the mind of self-importance, it creates that problem every single time. And if we take it at the small scale and we just flip the members, so imagine every member in that group changes their mind to wish others to be happy and free from suffering. So the mind of love and the mind of compassion. So now they start caring about the other members of the group. And therefore, because we've talked about where happiness and suffering actually come from, and they understand that it's coming from inner peace, then they understand that even if they don't get certain things or some desires are not always fulfilled, they're still at peace and they're still happy. Therefore, being able to care in conjunction with the mind, with the wisdom mind, knowing where happiness and suffering actually come from, which is within our own minds, then it becomes a harmonious and functional group of people where they're able to collaborate more effectively, they're able to listen to each other, and they're able to let go and be patient with each other because they're not always believing that they're the most important thing in that group. So we could see that if we flip the mind of selfishness and self-importance with the mind of love and compassion, it becomes a harmonious and functional group of people. And this is why it's important to rely on the notion of cause and effect. Why? Because when we enlarge the group of people, then there's no reason why the mind of self-importance would start working better on a larger scale, since it was flawed to begin with. Therefore, the cause, which is self-importance, always creates the mind of suffering and a dysfunctional effect. And this is why it's so important to rely on that. And the opposite, love and compassion, creates harmony, peace of mind, and a functional group. So therefore, if we scale it up to the world, so just a smaller as we go, a community, and then a country or province or state or region or area, to a larger community, to a country, to the world, we could understand that if there's more people and if the majority of people rely on self-importance and selfish mind, it will always be dysfunctional. It becomes a critical mass problem. And therefore, if the critical mass are dysfunctional because they're relying on the mind of self-importance, then it becomes a dysfunctional unit altogether. It doesn't matter what scale it is. It's just that, yes, it becomes more complex because there's more actors involved, but nonetheless, it's still a problem. And this is why it's important to rely on the law of cause and effect, because it means that it doesn't matter what scale it's at, the mind of self-importance and selfishness is always a problematic mind, creating problems and suffering. Whereas the mind of love and compassion is the mind that creates harmony everywhere, at every scale as well. And that's the logical reasoning, a basic logical reasoning that it's easy to see, where compassion is the mind to cultivate and the mind of self-importance is the mind to let go. And we might argue that, well, if someone else is doing it, then I should be doing it too. And this is where we start getting into what we call the problem of the commons. You could look it up and read about it, but it's a simple mind experiment, social experiment, but it's actually, we live it all the time. We could see it in the state of the world that is actually the case, where people get into or fall in that trap. So the problem of the commons states that, imagine there's a lake with fish in it, and there's a community surrounding that lake that use the lake for sustenance in order to eat, basically, and survive. So they fish the fish out of the lake and eat the fish. And the community all use this lake. Now, the problem in common states, and this is basically you could change the lake for the world, but it comes to the same problem. Now imagine that the families or the communities and the families in that community, basically at the moment, imagine that they're fishing according to the rate of reproduction of that fish in the lake, and therefore they're able to sustain their survival because they're respecting the natural flow or natural process and of time for the fish to reproduce. Now imagine that one family unit decides to become greedy. Okay, so they believe that they're more important and that they should have more. Okay? And therefore they start overfishing. They say, well, I have to catch more so that my neighbor catches less. And now, because the other family sees that, they have to do the same. They become at odds and at competition with the family unit that believes that they're more important, therefore they have to take more. So that other family unit does the same thing. And because they want to make sure they eat, and that the family eats and survives, because they're only thinking about themselves, so that we look at it only me perspective for self-importance, but we could also create a group, meaning my family, because we become very appropriated, or we become like the owners of that family. And therefore it becomes us. It's like an extension of us. And so it's the same mind, nonetheless. And therefore, this other family starts overfishing, and then by the time you know it, every family is trying to do the same thing because they want to make sure they have enough fish for the family to survive. And what happens, and you can see where this is going, is that they fish more than what the fish could actually reproduce, and by the time you know it, there's not enough fish to feed the community. And the whole community is now suffering from lack of fish, just because of the mind of self-importance. And you could see it as if you were flipping this and everyone were thinking about others, they would fish just enough for them to survive because they would be comfortable letting it go or letting it be for the other families because they care for the other community members. And therefore they're willing to sacrifice or let go and not have too much, and because they care about the other families in the unit and not only their own family. And this is, again, a very simple example to show where the mind of compassion, love and compassion is a functional mind, whereas the mind of self-importance and selfishness is a dysfunctional mind. And we could now look at the state of the world, where it's at right now, and see that if most of us, and this is where it's going, because we have a strong encouragement. We're encouraging a lot in society to believe that we're the most important and that we should only take care of ourselves. Now, this doesn't come in contradiction with the ability to take care of ourselves, but we should do it with others in mind, not at the expense of others. And that's the difference. Okay? It's just a mindset. But it's an important mindset that creates a functional, harmonious society or community, whereas the opposite creates a dysfunctional and destructive society, which is what we're seeing at this current state of the world. Therefore, this is why it's important to at least have the logical reasonings behind compassion, so that we're convinced that compassion is the mind to generate, and it actually creates a peaceful and happy mind. Why is that? Because if we're not always trying to hoard and grab things for ourselves, we're less worried, we're more at peace, and we're more at harmony with everyone else because we're also more caring. And therefore, by design, other people will also be caring back to us, unless someone is really in selfishness. But we have to show an example. And the more we show examples to the people around us, the more likely it is to become harmonious, because no one is actually there to hurt everyone. Yeah? And if they do, it's out of ignorance, and it's like a disease. They have a mental illness. And therefore, out of compassion, we should try to help everyone. So we have to think about it over and over again and go into the depths of compassion to see why we should do. But this is the reasoning why. So it creates peace of mind in our own mind, and it creates a harmony with everyone around us. And through cause and effect, what goes around comes around, one of even Newton's laws, with every action is an equal and opposite reaction. So this also works so Newton's observed law of cause and effect works at every level. Yeah. It doesn't change because the law of cause and effect doesn't magically switch or become different at different scales. It's just that there's more actors involved, there's more factors involved, but it still remains the same. And so the law of action reaction, the difference is that sometimes we fail to understand that the cause and the effect and the reaction or the comeback is not always instantaneous. Yeah. For instance, if there's seeds that lay dormant in the desert, and then there's a flash rainfall, and then we have a big bloom that hasn't been seen in 30 years. But the seeds had been laid 30 years later dormant, waiting for any waterfall or just the appropriate conditions for the bloom to occur, for the sprouts and the flowers to bloom. And therefore, the action of basically the seeds falling to the ground and the reaction of the bloom, which then create another seed falling in the ground. So every action and reaction, cause and effect, is not only always instantaneous, not one after another. There could be a lot of steps in between for the appropriate conditions to come together for it to occur. But Newton's law of every action has an equal and opposite reaction works at every level. So therefore, if we give out compassion, we're more likely to get compassion as well. Yeah? And the opposite is true. If we have a self-importance mind and we give out problems and suffering, then the more likely we are to get back the same reaction, meaning another person that is believing they're self-important and therefore will try to compete and crush us because they believe they're more important than us, as opposed to coming together in a collaborative and harmonious way. And these are the reasonings why we ought to develop compassion. Now, in terms of how to develop compassion, or before we get to that, what we wanted to discuss is also compassion fatigue, because we hear about that quite a bit in today's society, is that we want to blame compassion as the problem of our fatigue. Because let's say we're too good a person. Yeah? And we hear that a lot, and it's kind of funny and makes you laugh a bit, but basically we're too good and it basically drains us. Yeah? And the real problem from that is because there's a misunderstanding of where the true causes of happiness and suffering actually come from. If we listen to the first teachings on happiness and suffering, we come to see how happiness and suffering are actually coming from within our own mind and not from our external circumstances or things we get or pleasures we get or experiences we get, but actually from inner peace. So happiness is actually coming from inner peace and not external things. Now, let's say we don't have that understanding of where the true causes of happiness are. And we have a firm belief that happiness is in external circumstances. And now we mix it with the wish for others to be happy and free from suffering. Because we believe happiness and suffering come from external circumstances, then our compassion and our love forces us to try to change all our external circumstances for the other person. Knowing that people's desires are always changing, they're always shifting, and if one desire is fulfilled, then they'll just be replaced with the next one. Therefore, it's a never-ending list of someone that is never satisfied, basically, because we know very well that external things are impermanent, and the experiences and pleasures that they provide don't last. And therefore, we're always out for the next one. And on top of that, we're not always in control, and we're really most likely never in control of external circumstances, such as the weather, what other people do or say. Therefore, it becomes an impossible task to try to change our external circumstances, believing that these external circumstances are the true causes of happiness and suffering. But instead of questioning the true causes of happiness and suffering, we blame compassion as the problem. Whereas the true problem is what we call attachment, meaning the belief that external circumstances are the cause of happiness and suffering. So the true problem, or what's actually creating compassion fatigue, is not the compassionate mind. It's the belief that external circumstances are the cause of suffering and happiness. And therefore, to no avail, we will burn ourselves out because we're trying to realize an impossible thing. Whereas the compassion, in conjunction with the wisdom of where true happiness and suffering actually come from, will never create fatigue. Because we know that we're not going to start chasing a pipe dream. We understand that reality, and instead, what we try to do out of love and compassion is help others achieve inner peace by helping them let go of their attachments, their addictions, their anger, and any other mental illness, and try to bring them back to an inner peace. And therefore, it's a whole different, another different endeavor, which is also not possible to do. Like, we cannot change someone's mind. We can only guide them, exactly like these teachings. They're only guides. But the real work has to be done by the person themselves to want to change and develop inner peace. But at least we're there to guide. And what's more important, not only are we there to guide, but we are there to show an example, meaning that we could only teach others to be compassionate if we ourselves know how to be compassionate. Yeah? So therefore, we cannot teach someone to read if we haven't learned to read ourselves. So this is the same premise. We cannot teach someone to be compassionate and loving and have inner peace if we don't know how to build it ourselves. Therefore, the first step in trying to help others is learning how to be loving and compassionate and to have and develop this inner peace. The other thing what's important to touch upon is try to create compassion for all living beings. Yeah? So not only those that are close to us and our family and friends, where we actually have an attachment to them, meaning that we sometimes we feel that our happiness is dependent on these close people around us to be happy. And therefore, if they're not happy, we're not happy. But that doesn't really hold up logically, because we have to be happy to show others how to be happy. And from a logical and realistic standpoint, our happiness is actually not coming from other people. So happiness and suffering are coming from the way we see things, from our inner states of minds, and not from external circumstances. And people are an external circumstance. So therefore, we have to learn to separate attachment, the belief that others are the cause of our happiness, with love and compassion. We could let go of attachment, but we don't let go of love and compassion. We never let go of the wish for others to be happy and free from suffering, but we let go of the belief that these people are the cause of our happiness and suffering. Yeah? So it's very subtle. We need to think about this over and over again in order to really refine our way of thinking, in order to just remove the part that is creating problems in our mind and only keep the states of minds that cause inner peace. So the ending meditation is going to be towards generating universal compassion. So trying to generate a compassion for all living beings, not a biased compassion, which is just those that are close to us, that we know. But try to develop a compassion for all living beings, even those that are strangers, those we don't know, those that are actually sometimes enjoying very good external conditions, and also those that are harming others. Okay. So the first step, of course, is creating love, which we talked about in a previous teaching, which is the wish for others to be happy. And through that love, we will naturally develop a compassion for them, meaning a wish for them to be free from suffering. So normally when we see someone, let's say someone we dislike suffering, let's go from an opposite end perspective. Yeah? Because those that are close to us, we know what it feels like to be compassionate. We won't want those that are close to us to be suffering. But let's say we take, for example, those that are that we consider our enemy. I know it's a strong word, but those we dislike. And usually it's difficult for us to develop compassion for them. So this is actually the opposite way we would react to see when we see someone that we do know suffering. This is because we only cherish those that are close to us. So we only love, we only wish those people close to us to be happy. Actually, yeah. So this is what we have to really try to open up. So the way the meditation will go through is that we're going to be thinking about those that are thinking, or those that are actually experiencing pain and suffering from a disease such as cancer, such as AIDS or Parkinson's, whatnot, any other disease that someone might be having. Okay? And sometimes for those, it's actually easier because it's manifest pain. It's pain that we see, that we could actually comprehend, and that they're currently in pain. So it's sometimes easier to develop compassion for them. And really, what we're going to go into in the ending meditation is really try to feel for these people that are maybe dying from illness or from accidents, and they have no choice but to go through this pain. So that's the first step. We're going to go through more. The first step is just generating compassion for those that is easiest to create compassion for. Yeah. And then we'll go talk about those that are not currently experiencing pain, okay, but are still experiencing other forms of suffering. Okay? So we'll include those, of course, those that have a mental illness, such as ignorance or anger, all the way there, even those that have it's more difficult to even see them as a problem, but anger is really a mental illness. They're not well. Okay, so people that have mental illnesses are important to look at them. So they're not actually in any maybe manifest pain, but their minds are very heavy, very negative, and we need to find compassion for them, to wish for them to be liberated from those states of minds that are creating such a negativity and such pain, such suffering for them in their daily life. Now, the other aspect or the other group of people that we're going to look at are those that have maybe everything from a materialistic perspective. Yeah? And even these people are not free from suffering. They always want more, so they have a lot of greed, they're not very satisfied, or their life is not fulfilling. Even though they have every pleasure, everything that they want from an external perspective, but we know good examples of people that have everything. They have a lot of money, they have a lot of resources, yet they're never at peace. And actually some commit suicide because they can never fill this void or this gap that they feel. And therefore the only way to get rid of that emptiness or that gap that they feel is through a suicide. Yeah. So even if people have everything they have right now, it doesn't mean that they're free from suffering. And maybe not right now, and they might be in very pleasurable states right now, but eventually when they'll have to part ways with all their stuff, such as when their body becomes old and incapable of enjoying all these things, and eventually when they're going to have to pass or die, we won't be able to carry with them all these pleasures, all these enjoyments, and all these things with them at their death, which will create a lot of suffering for them. So even though it's not manifest right now, we know that it's just a time bomb waiting to happen if they don't develop the wisdom of where happiness and suffering actually come from. And the last group, which is sometimes the most difficult group for us to generate compassion for, are those that are harming others. Yeah. And this is the most difficult group of people for us to create compassion for. And basically, we have to understand that those that are creating problematic cases or are harming others are starting their journey of negative effects. They're just creating the causes now for a future suffering, if they're not already suffering right now, because those that are harming others are usually have a mental illness, such as if they're not caring or ignorant about the way things actually work, it is a problem in their mind, and it will create suffering in the future for them. And this is through the understanding, again, of cause and effect, meaning with every action comes its opposite and equal reaction. So they'll end up suffering later on in the future. So therefore, again, it's not based on what they're experiencing now, and maybe they are experiencing large suffering from ignorance and from those mental illnesses that they have in order to create harm towards others. But maybe we feel that some do not have that anguish, but they will end up having to experience suffering later on in the future. So therefore, bringing that their future suffering in the present moment, so understanding where they're leading to, we could generate compassion for them as well. So it's as if understanding, let's say we have a child and they're creating certain bad habits, and we could actually understand where it's going if we don't intervene and try to help them. And therefore, out of compassion and out of care for them, we want to help, right? Basically, that's the feeling we have with people that are harming others, or any other group of people that are not experiencing manifest pain or manifest suffering right now, is that what we're doing is we're bringing the future outcome that they will end up suffering into the present moment, knowing that it will eventually occur, and therefore generate compassion for them. And this is how we're able to bring all our compassion in the present moment for any group of people. Yeah, is because we know where it's going to lead, and therefore, out of caring for others, knowing that they're going to end up hitting the wall, we try to prevent them from doing so, or we try to prevent them from doing so. But first, we have to generate that wish for them to be free from suffering. Yeah? And that's how we're going to end with the ending meditation with regards to trying to generate this compassion. So in the ending meditation, what we're going to do is we're going to contemplate these different groups. And if any one of them really touches your heart, try to stay there and generate the strongest compassion, the strongest wish for them to be free from suffering. Remember, always keep in mind the wisdom of where happiness and suffering actually come from. And once we have that compassion, a strong wish out of love, wishing others to be happy, therefore generating compassion, the wish for others to be free from suffering, knowing that is a functional mind. It's a mind that will create inner peace for yourself and harmony for those around you. So knowing the benefits of wanting to generate compassion, we generate compassion. And how this is going to work in our daily life is that the next time we cross people or we see people on the news, what we try to do is we try to generate this compassion that we've practiced in meditation. So practice makes perfect. So the more we learn to generate compassion and we know what it feels like to be compassionate towards others, then it's easier for us to actually generate it in our daily life when we're not in formal meditation. And that's the point of practicing compassion. Yeah. So with that being said, please take a comfortable meditation posture. in which you can be both relaxed and alert. Make sure that your back is straight but not tense. Rest your hands in your lap and gently close your eyes. And just take a few moments just to breathe and let your mind relax, calm down. So begin by thinking about those that are suffering intense manifest pain right now. There are so many people experiencing really bad mental and physical suffering from illnesses such as cancer, such as AIDS, such as COVID, or any other illness that you can think of that you might know people around you that have it. You could think about all the people who have lost a child, a family member, or a friend through that illness. Just the, the family members watching this person become weaker and weaker until they pass and perish. Knowing that it's impossible to cure and that it's imminent, their death is imminent. So not only the person that is actually afflicted with the illness, but all the family members and friends around them that are suffering from looking on towards this person that is dying. And every day, remember, thousands of people are experiencing the agony of dying from illness and from accidents. And without choice, they're separated forever from everyone they love, and those they leave behind often experience inconsolable grief and loneliness. Just bring that to mind. Generate a wish for all these people to be happy and free from suffering. Even those that are dying, wish them to be at peace and happy, because there's no choice. So wish them to have their final moments at peace and in happiness, and also all family members and those close to them as well. Now let's extend even more people and try to really build our compassion. So throughout the world, we know and we see how many people are suffering from the horrors of war, from genocide, from bombings, from massacres, from famine out of war-torn countries. There's many people that are in refugee camps in squalid conditions and hoping someday that they'll be able to live more peacefully in a better place. Many people waiting maybe to be reunited with loved ones, not knowing if they're dead or alive. Just all this uncertainty in all these countries and people that are suffering from war, famine, genocide, massacres, violence. So much of it in today's world. So bring those to mind and generate love and compassion for them, wishing them to be free from that suffering. Now extend it again to all those that are suffering from natural disasters And we're having more and more in today's world floods, earthquakes, forest fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, monsoons, you name it. All those that their communities have been devastated, people are left homeless and hungry, or those that are killed, and those that are buried alive under all that rubble. And people are left searching and waiting for their loved ones, not knowing if they were caught in those natural disasters. Just to get a feel for it, think of how you would feel if that was happening to you or to your family and friends. Now extend the circle of compassion. Also, just remember, those that are not actually currently experiencing manifest pain are still experiencing other forms of suffering. There's so many people that find it difficult to satisfy even the smallest of desires. And they're always in this dissatisfaction state, those that are with heavy addiction. Even those that on a daily basis always feel this depression, this torment, feel like everyone's out to get them. These are all states of minds and that are not from any other condition that we've seen before, that we went through in the meditations, but people that are suffering from these mental illnesses that generate such strong suffering. So this anger, hate, addiction, jealousy, greed, those that are never satisfied, have this hole, those that are depressed, that are feeling depressed, all these mental illnesses. Think about all those individuals and generate compassion for them as well. Now generate also compassion for those who have not realized this wisdom, the wisdom of where happiness and suffering actually come from, and the wisdom of generating compassion. Why is that? Is because if they don't generate this mind and come to these realizations, they will suffer in the future without any doubt. It's just a matter of cause and effect. And that they're on the road to hitting that wall of suffering, be it on their deathbed or whatnot, but it will happen eventually. So seeing, just like if you would see a child doing mistakes, knowing what it will cost them in the future, generate compassion, the wish for them to be free from suffering. Therefore, it would create the mind that would want to help them prevent future suffering. Why make them hit that wall to begin with, knowing that they're going to hit it? So for all those who are making mistakes, relying on these selfish minds and attachment minds, knowing where it will lead them. Generate compassion, those that are harming others, out of ignorance and out of these mental illnesses such as anger and hate and fear. So knowing where it will lead them, generate compassion as well. Bring them into your mind. So bring all these people from all walks of life and generate a strong compassion for them. And once you have this mind of compassion, this wish to liberate them, to free them from suffering, the wish for them to be free from suffering, that is the object of meditation. And if your mind wanders, just rethink any of those groups that we discussed and regenerate the mind of compassion. before rising from meditation, make a determination to try and remember this compassion and try to generate it no matter who you cross, no matter who you see. Try to generate that compassion and rethink of these teachings. Try to remember. So make a determination to remember these teachings and try to generate compassion for every living being you cross and you see. So make that decision in your life to try in your daily life. And now you can gently rise from meditation. Thank you.